Over the course of human evolution, a fundamental shift occurred in the relationship between man and his cohabitants on planet Earth. Once competitors for basic resources, animals soon began to play a secondary role in human civilization as collections used to serve various cultural purposes. Through hieroglyphics and pictographs inscribed in the tombs of their deceased, Egyptians began to depict animals such as cranes, ibis, baboons, and cheetah living among them around 2500 BC. Theirs was a theological relationship to animals. The Egyptians viewed them as mystical incarnations that represented the servants of the gods. Upon creating an aviary for the Athenian public in 500 BC, the ancient Greeks studied these birds as a link between the primal elements of the natural world and humankind, essentially a philosophical inquiry. By 200 BC, the Roman Empire maintained a large menagerie, serving as a symbol of their prestige and power. They regularly killed wild animals during bloody contests in their arenas to heighten the excitement of the crowd. For the ancient Romans, these animals were a grand spectacle of violence. During the Middle Ages, wild animal collections were rarely displayed for the public and instead kept by royalty as status symbols. Exotic animals were often used as diplomatic gifts from one king to another. Despite the multitude of earlier animal collections, it was only under the rule of Louis XIV in 1664 AD that the modern conception of the zoological park began to take shape. In the centuries to follow, zoos became a focal point for public interest in wildlife, as well as a first-hand research center for the scientific community. With this mounting interest in animal collections came an evolution in the construction and objectives of the zoo itself. Traditional cement holding cells were replaced by naturalistic exhibits that emphasized a more immersive zoo-going experience. Hamburg opened the first zoo without bars in 1907, a revolutionary facility designed by Karl Hagenbeck. As aristocrats financed the construction of zoos, larger and more elaborate exhibits were built to draw an eager suburban populace to see wild animals. By 1978, nearly 900 zoos were in operation worldwide. Today, as our global human society drastically alters the natural world, zoos are undergoing a dramatic change in their daily operations and ultimate goals.
Zoos today are very different than they were when I first got into this career. When I got into the career, zoos were very competitive. They were very secretive about what they knew about their collections. That's all changed.
I think the public is always interested in animals, especially when the wildlife in their native habitats are becoming reduced. A lot of people don't have the opportunity to travel to Africa, Arctic, to see these animals.
I think in the future, zoos will be the last stand of some species, as they have been now. There are some zoos that have animals that have less than 100 in population on the whole planet. And to think of that just boggles the mind, but it's the truth, and it's something that does hit you in the face, and you have to realize it.
Some animal rights organizations actively seek to expose zoos for poor treatment of their animals, and some go as far as to claim that no animal belongs at a zoo. More moderate thinking suggests that perhaps, just as with domestication, some animals are simply better suited at zoos than others.
Well, we're a bit of a paradox here at the zoo. Our front gate is at about 6,800 feet, but our animals adapt very well, it seems. Animals that will not adapt to these sorts of climates just aren't in our collection.
If we're going to have animals in zoos, then we need to manage those animals and manage them responsibly, regardless of whether they're endangered, threatened, or if they're very common in the wild.
We try to choose the animals that we exhibit here to mimic their natural habitat. One exception to that would be polar bears. But our pools are, during summer, they're cooler. We have air conditioning for the animals. So we try to take into account their natural habitat and try to provide an environment in the zoo that will mimic their environment in the wild. There are other zoos like SeaWorld in Orlando. They have a totally enclosed multi-million-dollar place that produces snow for their polar bears and penguins. So the zoos try to go out of their way to match the animals' needs with the environment that we're putting them in.
We do have some species that you would think would be very warm climate type animals that have adapted very well to living on the mountain. Point being African lions. Our African lion loves the cold weather, loves the snow, loves to sit out on his rock and watch it snow and watch the people walk by. Of course, our Amur tigers love to do that because they're from a very cold climate. But you wouldn't think that the African lions would do that, but he loves the snow.
It seems impossible to determine if these piranhas are psychologically strained by their tank, but what about this bobcat and his cage? While it would seem as if a captive puffin can still be a puffin, and indeed these parakeets are far more free than most in the United States, can a cougar truly be a cougar at the zoo? Can patrons really appreciate the cunning hunting methods of the Arctic fox at the zoo? Of what use is this golden eagle's keen eyesight? Would a naked mole rat prefer to live in plastic tubes under bright fluorescent lights, or in subterranean caverns lit discreetly by black lights? Though these fascinating creatures can control the degree of nutritional content in their own feces, they have no jurisdiction over whether they live in a zoo funded by city tax dollars or one bankrolled largely by wealthy private industries.
Well, it's interesting to see where has all the interest gone in the zoo world in the last 15 years. Much of it was spent on very measurable things, like reproduction. I mean, how much better at measuring can you get than either you produce offspring or you don't? So we tend, as a scientific society, to concentrate on things that we can measure success in. You know, how do you measure the happiness of a hyena? It can't be done. I mean, to a certain extent, you can look at hormones in their urine and tell whether they're stressed out or not. But it's not like you're going to make the cover of Time because you have the happiest hyenas in captivity. But you will make the cover of Time, maybe, if you produce the world's first artificially inseminated tiger.
If you were a wild animal, would you rather live in a zoo or would you rather live out in the wild?
Out in the wild. Zoo.
At the zoo? Okay, why would you? Why would you say out in the wild?
Because there you'd have more room to roam around.
And why would you say at the zoo?
Because they take good care of you.
Because they take good care of you. Okay.
And you want to get eaten.
Yeah, you don't want to get eaten. Nothing eats you at the zoo. Huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'd rather be out on land.
Certainly the environment impacts the health and the well-being of those animals. We see a lot of the same types of health issues that we see in people. Penguins, for instance, particularly temperate region penguins, which are not normally housed or maintained in enclosed environmental facilities, generally aren't exposed to mosquitoes, so here they are and they end up with malaria. So again, these are things that these guys aren't exposed to in their home range, but yet they are here. And so we have to recognize that and deal with it.
The noise pollution, if you're near a freeway or something like that, you know, when you first move in, it just drives you nuts. But after a year or two, you just tune it out. That's part of the environment. They're pretty much immune to it. The polar bears will get up on their exhibit and watch the cars go by. So it's both negative and positive enrichment for the animals.
One of the most notable changes to zoos has been an emphasis on nationwide animal management. At the entrance of most major zoos, usually next to the admission gate, one can see the logo of the American Zoo and Aquarium Association, known as the AZA. Though the organization was created in 1924 and today is among the most prominent of all conservation-based wildlife programs, the importance of AZA accreditation to the public is significantly less well established.
The public, I don't think they equate AZA with zoos at this point, but the AZA is trying to make efforts to put their name out there that they are kind of the governing board of zoos.
I guess in one way you could look at the AZA certification, accreditation, as a seal of good housekeeping. There are parameters and limits for taking care of these animals. They are under our stewardship, and it's important that we take care of them in certain ways. Also that we're available to the public in certain ways as well, with education opportunities. Being able to see the animals in our collection, many of which are endangered, many of which are making their last stand at zoos.
The AZA did a study a while back. They asked the public who had more influence, who is protecting nature the most. And the name they threw out the most was PETA. You know, that's the name that's out there in the news. That's one that people recognize. So AZA has started a campaign to try to educate the public as to what their mission towards zoos are. There's about 220 zoos that belong to the AZA, and they just have a higher standard for animal care. We have to follow their guidelines as far as exhibits, perimeter fencing, medical care. And the accreditation does carry some weight in communities, especially when you're going for funding. You can say, well, we're accredited by a national AZA committee, and that helps.
In that way, I think the AZA is important to be a supporter of us and we a supporter of them, kind of a symbiotic relationship.
Which has been a source of controversy also. Is it just the rich zoos that get the accreditation? Are the other ones any less worthy? Some of those that are in the news reflect badly on zoos like ourselves that are doing everything we can to provide a good environment for the animals. So anytime we want to do an expansion or something new, we have to tear down old exhibits to build new exhibits, which is actually a good thing. Some of the exhibits built for polar bears in the 70s are antiquated now, and we just cringe when we see them.
Have you been to this zoo before?
The vast majority of animals in zoos today are captive bred animals as opposed to wild caught. 40 years ago, it would have been the opposite.
What do you like most about the zoo?
The shop.
The shop? The gift shop?
Yeah.
Why do you like the gift shop?
There's a whole bunch of stuff in there, like pet animals, like stuffed animals.
AZA did a study a while back, and they asked people around the country, what's the best zoo in the country? And they would say, well, the San Diego Zoo. Well, have you ever been there? Well, no. Well, how do you know it's the best zoo? Well, I just know. Well, they have a $13 million PR budget, which is $4 million more than our total budget.
No one's getting rich in the zoo world. There isn't any money being siphoned off and not going to the tigers. It just isn't there. There's a struggle every day for people who work in the zoo community to just pay for what they know needs to be done. That doesn't stop everyone from being a critic, as they should be, because zoos always are going to need to be pushed to do the best that they can.
While all zoos compete both directly and indirectly with other venues for public attendance, this competition is especially true of zoos that rely more heavily on admission gate receipts for annual funding. Since a continuum may be drawn between such recreational settings as a museum and a circus, with zoos falling somewhere in between, critics have often charged zoos with emphasizing entertainment over education.
Well, we try to be educational, but the reason people come in is to be entertained. They want to see the animals. So if we can show them the animals, but interject the educational aspect.
Would you rather go to the zoo or go to school for a day?
Go to the zoo.
Many times we have stealth education where somebody might be learning something, they don't even realize it. But I'm sure those factors come into play somewhere along the line. We try not to shortchange one for the other, though.
Do you learn about animals in your science class?
No. Actually,
Do you learn a little bit about animals?
I have a science class.
Uh-huh. Do you learn about animals at all?
Sometimes.
Uh-huh. Do you think you learn more about animals at the zoo or in your science class?
At the zoo?
I think we're kind of one step above a classroom because we have the hands-on potential of the animals.
Do you think the zoo is more like going to a museum, or do you think it's more like going to a theme park?
A museum.
A museum.
Park.
I don't see us as equated with some of the theme parks and circuses, which are basically entertainment-driven.
We don't make our animals do tricks. We do teach them certain behaviors that helps them when we need to interact with them in a medical way.
And people not only understand animals better, but they're more familiar with what a natural habitat is. So zoos can no longer get away with painting a mural on the back of an elephant saying, here's nature, close to nature as we can get.
The more money we put into an exhibit to mimic their natural habitat, I think goes hand in hand with conservation. If the public can see their natural habitat and the animals acting normally in a habitat that we provide for them versus a concrete habitat, then I think they get more of an impression of how they would react in nature. And in that way, we can kind of convey the conservation message also.
Would you rather have more rides or would you rather have more information?
More information. Rides.
More rides? You want to have more information?
Yeah.
Okay.
We do blend recreation, education, and conservation as much as possible. So when a child comes here, we hope that they take away some meaningful experience, and maybe down the road they'll realize that they really did learn something while they were having fun watching the hippos interact with the keepers or whatever.
There are moments when you look at the news and you think, yeah, we get it now. We get that we are part of a whole and part of a web of life, and that if we disturb any part of it, it will only harm us also. Although I'd like to see us be more altruistic. Even if it didn't harm us, I would hope that we would want to save the grizzly bear. And there are other times when I think people are just too selfish and that we care about driving gas-guzzling cars and we don't care about what effect it has. I hope, deep inside, I hope that people are changing.
I think we realize now that in today's world, more and more animals are getting pushed out of their habitats. The populations are declining rapidly.
I think zoos of the 21st century are just as much a mecca for conservation as they are for recreation. There are so many conservation programs going on at different zoos now, from our black-footed ferret program to our Mexican gray wolf program. We're one of only 5 breeding locations for the Mexican gray wolf that they're going to eventually reintroduce into the Southern Rockies.
Case in point here at our zoo, the bald eagles. We were involved in a breeding program starting in the mid-60s. Released probably about 11 bald eagles into the wild.
Black-footed ferrets were down to 9 animals on the planet. 9 animals in a small valley in Wyoming were discovered. They thought they were extinct, but they found these animals. 7 of them were viable for breeding, and from that, in less than 20 years, we're back to a world population of about 500 or 600 And we're in breeding season now. Hopefully we'll get another strong litter of kits and be able to send some of those back into the wild.
A zoo can't handle all the endangered animals.
Zoos see themselves having a part or a responsibility in supporting field research and field habitat conservation so that the animals in the wild that are already there stay there, do well, increase in numbers, and so forth.
There are some species that we have here in our collection that we do use as just that, animal ambassadors. That's what we call them. And they are animals that we can take out and show to the public. In some cases, the public are able to touch them, look at them much more closely and see what they're all about, try to understand where they fit in the grand circle of life.
Realizing that A, we should not be consumers of wildlife, because at one time we had that trademark, if you will, to being producers of wildlife.
That's where the AZA comes in. And there's also SSPs, which is a species survival plan. Some of the endangered animals, certain zoos will be allowed to breed them. Certain zoos are more of a holding facility.
What are the causes for this animal to decline in the wild, and have those causes been addressed and reversed? Certainly it does no good to bring these animals into a captive situation, manage them, and then release them back to an area where they're only going to die anyway.
Maybe, we touch one or two children when they're growing up and they become environmentalists and help save the animals in their native habitat, or we inspire them to buy an acre of Amazon rainforest.
All of those programs are important to the survival of the planet.
We can't go out and be a part of the problem. We need to be a part of the solution.
Zoos throughout history have always told us more about the society that has kept them than about animals themselves. And I am constantly asking myself, what do our zoos today, what will they tell future generations about us? I mean, certainly they'll tell future generations that we care about science, that we have had huge breakthroughs in understanding the biology of various species. But how about compassion and spirituality and caring enough about animals to save them? Will zoos get that across to future generations? Is that part of what our society feels today? And those are questions that remain open.
In some sense, zoos began as a celebration of human dominion over the natural world, with collections of rare or dangerous animals to affirm control over the environment. However, this victory ultimately proved to be a hollow one, and thus today, zoos find themselves serving as educators, entertainers, and conservationists. As industrial development burrows ever deeper into delicate ecosystems, zoos may someday be the only link between wild animals and domesticated humans. In modern society, zoos have created a sphere within which once close neighbors can again meet, albeit in a setting estranged from the true homes of either one. In this way, zoos are just such a compromise, the world of nature on the terms of humankind.